He talked about all the different investments being made in NATO, troops being moved, being added on permanent locations in Poland, et cetera, et cetera. He also made a direct line between gas prices here in the U.S. and Russia later in his comments. Let's bring in Professor of Historical Studies at Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies and Associate at Harvard University Center for European Studies, Mary Elise Cerati. Also with us, MSNBC military analyst, former Deputy Commander of the United States European Command and retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General Steph Twitty joins us. Good to have you both with us today. And I'll first, General Twitty, ask you a little bit about the state of NATO right now after listening to the president's comments. I mean, this is a real turnaround for the alliance, but also the significance of permanent U.S. troops now and enhancing those troops. How much of a historic moment is it for some European nations to have that happen?
Well, first of all, Maggie, it's great to see this alliance remain ironclad with Ukraine's fight against Russia. I will tell you that it's also impressive to see all the things that have been committed. Of course, there have been words, not deeds yet. Hopefully those deeds will come to fold. But if you take a look at the U.S., we're going to bolster our commitment in the East. We'll have a rotational brigade combat team going to Romania. We'll have the U.S. Army 5th Corps, which is commanded by a lieutenant general. We're going to increase that. We're going to put a support battalion in there as well. And also in the West, in Rota, Spain, we're going to increase the destroyers. We're going to increase the aircraft, F-35 stealth aircraft will go to UK. Alongside that, our allies are stepping up and doing the same thing. When you hear about Germany increasing their military spending, as well as all these countries committed to their 2%, that there is success in itself. And it's just good to see this alliance come together and contribute this way.
Professor Cerati is someone who studies and teaches about Europe and who's written an entire book about the relationship between Russia and the United States after the Cold War. What is your reaction to what we saw just in the last week sort of formalized? President Biden saying that Putin's getting exactly what he did not want. He wanted the Finlandization of NATO. He got the NATOization of Finland instead. What do you make of what we saw in Madrid the last couple of days?
Exactly. Yeah, I think the key takeaway from Biden's press conference just now and also from the summit was 5 words: as long as it takes. I saw the president very committed both to the alliance as a whole and to Ukraine in particular. And he's repeatedly said we're going to defend every single inch. You were kind enough to mention my book. My book is called Not 1 Inch, which is, of course, the fight with Russia over how much should go to NATO. We heard at the summit the answer: every single inch that wants to be in NATO will be defended. So I think that's the key takeaway, the commitment that the president is making.
I want to, General, I want to follow up on what the professor said. As long as it takes, again, the key takeaway in this battle between Western democracy, freedom, and the autocracy of Vladimir Putin. But I'll also want to follow up on inches. We've heard the president say before, when asked about Estonia, when asked about Latvia, when asked about Lithuania, he said, we will defend every single inch of NATO territory. My God, what a relief that is for Estonia, for Latvia, for Lithuania, for all of these other countries who became members of NATO. But let's just say it, General, they weren't always sure, especially over the past 5 years, that we were going to be there to defend them, were they?
Well, it's understandable that they were not sure. We have not, and when I say we, it's not just the U.S., but it's NATO as well. We have not dedicated a lot of forces to the east. And the Baltic states have always been concerned, given that they share a border with Russia. But we must go back to the reason why we're part of NATO. It goes back to the one attack on all. Attack on one is an attack on all. That's the Article 5 there. And so we're going to be a part of NATO. We have to commit ourselves to the defense, but also the words of, if there's an inch of Russia going into any one of our NATO countries, the U.S. must be committed to fight along with the Europeans.
All right, joining us now from Madrid, we have the host of Way Too Early, Jonathan Lemire. Didn't get a question in, but you can get one here.
He also didn't get beaten up.
He didn't get beaten up, so I feel like this is a win. So, Jonathan, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the president's comments, and then you can take it to the panel.
Thanks, Mika. Yeah, no enough Putin's bodyguards to toss around unlike last year at this time. But you're right. Certainly we heard from President Biden there, who did only call on 5 questioners, that his robust support for NATO and believing and sort of indicating that the allies would stay together for as long as it takes in order to defend NATO territory, defend Ukraine, and make sure that Russia does not advance any further. Now, the real headline coming out of this news conference is going to be what is said on domestic issues and the fact that he would support carving out the change to the filibuster in order to codify Roe v. Wade. And in fact, it goes to show how much domestic issues have hovered over this entire trip. The majority of the questions he did face today were about matters back home. But, General, staying on this topic for the moment, the idea of this war in Ukraine, we heard conflicting reports about a timeline. President Zelensky from Ukraine has been telling U.S. advisors, as we've been reporting, that he really wants to get this war over by winter, that he's afraid that if it lasts longer than that, the Russians will grow entrenched in the positions they've captured, and therefore that much harder to drive back next spring. But a lot of Western allies aren't sure that's possible. What's your assessment of it? And if this war does drag into 2023 in the spring, how much harder is it going to be able to keep this alliance together?
Well, a couple of points. Unfortunately, you cannot put a time on war. As you can see, the war of the day, some days you wake up and Russia has gained ground. The other days you wake up, the Ukrainians have gained ground. And so this war is going to go on for the long term. It's going to go back and forth, and it's grinding. And we can expect, in my mind, this will not take months, but it's going to take years, because I still believe that there's going to be an insurgency that's going to brew out of this war. We have to remember that a lot of the Ukrainians, they're angry. They've been bombed. Many of the women have been raped. They're just angry at the fact that the Russians came in and invaded their country. So I think we need to expect this war to go on for quite some time.
So, Professor, how bitterly ironic it is that you have Russia, who, of course, their national identity seems to be framed by their resistance first to Napoleon and then their resistance to Hitler, and framed by their perseverance in the face of a brutal, oppressive invader. And now it is the Russians who are the invaders, who are bogged down in Ukraine, who have failed repeatedly. I do wonder, does Vladimir Putin have years to grind this fight out, or does he have a weakened military and a weakened economy that is going to require him to try to find an exit ramp at some point before his army collapses completely?
Yeah, great question. I wish it were the latter, but I think it's the former. I think we're in for a long, grinding slog. Putin initially wanted to seize Ukraine quickly. He could not do that. So I think he's now changed his tactics, but not his ultimate aim of seizing all of Ukraine or as much as he can. So sadly, I think we're in for a long conflict. I also let me add, I think it's great that you brought the press conference in its entirety. I think what we just watched is one of the most important press conferences of his presidency, both on domestic and foreign policy. Domestically, he talked about ending the filibuster. In terms of foreign policy, we're stationing permanent troops in Poland. We're extending the border with Russia by nearly 800 miles, a little over 800 miles. We are really in a new world. So that was a major press conference, both domestically and foreign, and I'm glad you let your listeners see all of it.
All right. Johns Hopkins University, Mary Elise Cerati, thank you so much. She's the author of the book, Not 1 Inch, America, Russia, and the Making of Post-Cold War Stalemate. We appreciate it. Retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General Steph Twitty, Thank you as well. Thanks to both of you for your insight this morning.